For the first 10 seconds, imagine a story that doesn't start with a scream or a siren but with a whisper. A whisper from a woman whose life was built on care, compassion, and the quiet belief that goodness always wins. Her name was Angela Morris, a black immigrant nurse who had spent years healing strangers in a country she hoped would one day feel like home. And yet, on a night she would never forget, the very person sworn to protect her dragged her into a nightmare she could have never imagined. This is the story of an officer who thought his badge was a shield against consequences, a man who believed that a vulnerable woman alone in a parking lot was an easy target. What he never expected, what he could have never imagined, was that the truth he tried so hard to bury was already recording. Because hidden in the dark, clipped to his own uniform, a body cam was capturing everything. The fear, the lies, the abuse of power, and the moment that would expose him to the world. Stay with me, because what this footage reveals has shaken entire communities, sparked outrage nationwide, and raised a question that still echoes. How many times has this happened where no camera was rolling? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Angela Morris wasn't the kind of woman who looked for trouble. She avoided it the way some people avoided winter storms. Carefully, intentionally, and with a quiet awareness that the world wasn't always fair to women who looked like her. Coming from Georgia by way of Liberia, she had built a new life through relentless dedication. She worked the night shift at Westview Medical Center, a job that meant long hours, heavy responsibilities, and the kind of emotional battles most people never saw. But Angela saw them all. She saw families fall apart and come back together in emergency rooms. She saw life begin, life end, and life hang in the balance. Her coworkers described her as steady, unshakable, the kind of person whose presence alone made a room feel safer. Patients adored her for her warmth, her soft laugh, and the way she always remembered their stories. She had no enemies, no criminal record, and no reason to expect that danger would find her. Not here. Not in the parking lot of the hospital she had walked into nearly every night for 7 years. But all it takes for a life to derail is one moment. One person with too much power and too little accountability. That night, March 14th, began like any other. Angela clocked out at 11:47 p.m., the faint hum of fluorescent lights echoing in the hallway as she gathered her bag and badge. She was exhausted, but it was the kind of exhaustion she had grown used to, the gentle ache in her feet, the heaviness behind her eyes, the subtle adrenaline hangover from a shift that had seen 2 emergency surgeries and 1 heartbreaking loss. She waved to the janitor, a man she often shared small talk with, and stepped outside into the cool night air. The hospital parking lot was quiet, almost peaceful, with only a few scattered cars under flickering street lamps. Angela usually moved quickly. Her mother always taught her not to linger in parking lots, but she wasn't afraid. Not tonight. Not in this familiar place. She clicked her keys, her car chirped, and she took the first steps toward what she believed was the end of another routine shift. What she didn't know was that not far away, a police cruiser was idling at the edge of the lot. Inside sat Officer Daniel Hart, a man whose name she would come to fear, a man whose decisions in the next few minutes would change the course of both their lives. Officer Hart had a reputation, though it depended on whom you asked. To some, he was strict but effective, the kind of officer who kept order by refusing to tolerate nonsense. To others, particularly those who had experienced his temper firsthand, his name meant intimidation, aggression, and fear. He had been with the county police department for nearly a decade and had collected a troubling pattern of complaints. None had gone anywhere, of course. They never did. Whether it was his connections, his seniority, or the department's reluctance to stir controversy, Hart moved through his career without consequences. Supervisors chalked up his behavior to stress, toughness, or old-school policing. By the time the night of March 14th arrived, Hart carried himself with a dangerous confidence. He believed he was untouchable. That belief hardened into something darker when he spotted Angela walking alone. Maybe it was bias. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was the thrill of power. Whatever the reason, Hart flipped on his cruiser's lights, accelerated across the lot, and decided, without evidence, without provocation, without reason, that Angela Morris was a threat. Angela heard the siren chirp behind her and turned, confused. The lights were bright, too bright for a simple inquiry, and her stomach tightened as she held up her hospital ID. "Is everything okay, officer?" she asked, her voice calm but cautious. Hart didn't respond with courtesy. He didn't respond with reason. What he did instead was approach her fast, too fast, demanding she put her hands on the hood of his cruiser. Angela froze. She had seen videos, heard stories, listened to the warnings from her community. Still, she tried to explain. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I just got off work. This is my badge. My car is right there." But Hart was already in motion, already grabbing her arm with such force that she gasped. The parking lot, once peaceful, now felt suffocating. Angela wasn't resisting, she was terrified. But Hart's version of events would later claim otherwise. His report would paint her as non-compliant, agitated, suspicious. None of it was true. Not one word. He shoved her harder, her shoulder hitting metal, pain shooting through her. "Stop resisting," he yelled, though she wasn't moving at all. And then, in those chaotic seconds, something happened that neither of them noticed. The small blinking light on Hart's chest camera, still recording from an earlier call, continued documenting every second of what he was doing. What followed was confusion, fear, and a moment Angela would replay in her mind for months. Hart handcuffed her, ignoring her pleas, ignoring her badge, ignoring her tears. She felt humiliation mix with pain, the sharp cold metal around her wrists cutting into her skin. Her mind raced with questions. What did I do? How is this real? Why won't he listen? When Hart pushed her into the back seat of his cruiser, she stared through the window at the hospital she had so often thought of as her safe place. Tonight it felt like a distant world. Inside the car, she could hear Hart speaking into his radio, giving a version of the incident that made her sound dangerous, unpredictable. Lies, all of them. As the cruiser pulled away, Angela tried to steady her breathing. She didn't know where she was being taken. She didn't know if anyone had seen what happened. She didn't know if she would be believed. But hidden on Hart's uniform was the truth, unbiased, unedited, undeniable. A truth that would expose him, embarrass the department, and ignite a storm that no one, especially Hart, was prepared to face. The hours following Angela's arrest were a blur of confusion, humiliation, and disbelief. She had always known how fragile trust could be in certain encounters, but nothing had prepared her for the cold reality of being treated like a criminal after dedicating her life to helping others. When she reached the station, the fluorescent lights felt harsher, the silence heavier. She sat alone in a holding room, her wrists aching from the handcuffs, her dignity stripped away by a man who never even asked her name before deciding she was a threat. Angela's thoughts spiraled as she stared at the blank wall in front of her. Does anyone know where I am? Will anyone believe me? How do I prove something that happened with no witnesses? But unknown to her, the proof was already embedded in digital memory, a silent observer with no loyalty to lies. Meanwhile, Officer Hart was typing furiously at his workstation, crafting a narrative with the confidence of someone who had written false reports before and gotten away with each one. He described her as a suspicious individual loitering in a restricted area, claimed she resisted instructions, and noted potential theft activity, all phrases designed to justify his aggression. It was a story he believed would hold because it always had. Morning arrived, and with it came the first ripples of concern. Angela's coworker, a friend named Karen Whitfield, noticed she had never made it home. Karen had spoken to Angela minutes before she left the hospital and immediately sensed something was wrong when her text went unanswered. By 8 a.m., Karen was calling everyone she could think of, nurses, security staff, even Angela's supervisor. No one had seen her. Panic spread through the hospital, especially among those who knew Angela's patterns. She wasn't the type to disappear. Meanwhile, at the police station, Angela was finally allowed to make a phone call. Her voice shook as she dialed Karen, and with just a few words, "Karen, I've been arrested." "I didn't do anything." Her friend's shock turned into outrage. Karen contacted the hospital's legal department and within hours, administrators were demanding answers from the police department. Their first response was dismissive, brushing off concerns by emphasizing Angela's non-compliance. But something wasn't adding up, and the hospital staff knew it. Angela wasn't perfect, but she was steady, rational, grounded, a woman far more likely to de-escalate a situation than create one. As confusion grew, so did pressure on the department to explain what had happened. Word of Angela's arrest reached a local reporter named Melissa Carter, known for digging into stories that didn't sit right with her. Something about the incident felt off from the start. A respected nurse arrested without clear cause, a vague police statement, and a swift attempt to shift blame onto the victim. Melissa had covered similar cases before, cases where power overshadowed truth, and her instincts told her this was another. She reached out to the police department requesting the body cam footage. They declined. She requested the incident report and found it filled with vague language and inconsistencies. She requested security footage from the hospital lot, but the angles were too limited to provide a full picture. And still, the department refused to release Officer Hart's body cam footage. Melissa's suspicion grew sharper. Refusal didn't equal guilt, but it often signaled fear. If the footage supported the officer's claims, why hide it? She filed a formal public records request anyway, knowing it would take time. Meanwhile, the department issued a statement doubling down on Hart's account. Angela was painted as combative, erratic, and non-compliant. The narrative was set, or at least they believed it was. Angela's family reacted with disbelief and devastation when they heard what happened. Her mother, who lived in Georgia, was frantic, calling repeatedly, asking Angela if she was safe, if she had been hurt, if she had done anything to provoke the officer. Angela's answer was always the same, "No, Mama, I didn't do anything." Her younger sister, Naomi, contacted civil rights organizations, hoping someone would take interest in the case. By now, Angela had been released on bail, thanks to a combination of hospital advocacy and mounting public pressure, but the damage was already done. Her mugshot was circulating online. Strangers were debating her character. The officer's version was spreading faster than the truth. At home, Angela sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, still shaking from the trauma. She replayed the incident over and over, her mind stuck on the same question. Why me? As she answered calls from friends and family, she kept repeating her story, trying to make sense of the senseless. Meanwhile, in the police department's administrative wing, her arrest was already being filed away as another routine incident, until one detective noticed something no one else had. Detective Evan Rourke, a man known for being meticulous to the point of annoyance, reviewed new cases every morning. It was part of his routine, a habit he developed to stay aware of any patterns or anomalies that might signal deeper issues. When he reached Angela's arrest, something immediately felt wrong. The report was too vague, the language too rehearsed, and the timeline too conveniently structured. Rourke had worked in law enforcement long enough to recognize when someone was hiding something. He didn't know Hart personally, but he knew the type, officers who wore authority like armor and wielded it like a weapon. He decided to take a closer look, pulling up the officer's shift logs and noticing something strange. Hart had activated his body cam earlier in the night but had not logged a shutdown. That meant the camera should have been recording during Angela's arrest. So where was the footage? Rourke sent a request to the Digital Evidence Unit. Hours later, an email arrived with a single sentence that made his chest tighten. Footage from Officer Hart's body cam recovered, file attached. When he clicked the file and the video began to play, Rourke realized instantly why the department had refused to release it. It contradicted everything in Hart's report. Every claim, every detail, every lie. This wasn't just misconduct. This was abuse, plain and undeniable. And now the truth, raw, damning, impossible to spin, was in the hands of someone who refused to look away. Detective Evan Rourke stared at the body cam footage with a sinking heaviness settling in his chest, the kind that comes when truth is no longer something you have to find. It's something that forces itself onto you. The recording opened with mundane chatter from an earlier call, the soft scratch of radio static, and the faint scrape of Hart adjusting his vest. Nothing unusual. But then the scene shifted. The camera captured Hart pulling into the hospital parking lot, the cruiser's headlights cutting across empty spaces until they landed on Angela. Rourke watched as Hart stepped out of the vehicle, posture rigid, voice sharp, tone escalating before Angela even understood what was happening. The footage showed her raising her hands immediately, badge visible, posture non-threatening. There was no hesitation, no sign of resistance. She explained who she was, where she worked, why she was there. It didn't matter. Hart grabbed her arm with violent force, yanking her toward the hood of his car. The camera caught her flinch, her voice shaking, her knees buckling. Rourke paused, rewound, watched again. Every frame contradicted Hart's report. Every second revealed his intent. And in that moment, Rourke knew this wasn't just an incident gone wrong. This was the unraveling of a narrative Hart had probably used for years. Rourke printed the report, set it beside a transcript of the footage, and highlighted inconsistency after inconsistency, false statements, fabricated resistance, non-existent threats. The deeper he looked, the more disturbing the pattern became. Hart hadn't just lied. He had weaponized his badge, his authority, and the trust placed in him to craft a story meant to destroy an innocent woman's life. Rourke felt a surge of anger, controlled but undeniable. He had joined law enforcement to protect people like Angela, not to watch them be crushed under the weight of systemic negligence. Determined to expose the truth, he requested Hart's past records. What he found made his blood run cold. Hart had been involved in several controversial stops over the years, each with familiar language, non-compliant, suspicious behavior, possible theft, and every single time, the subject was a person of color. Complaints had been filed, too many to brush off as coincidence, but all were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Now Rourke understood why. Without footage, truth became optional. Now, for the first time, the camera had captured everything. And Rourke knew that if he didn't act on this evidence, he would become part of the same problem he had silently criticized for years. That afternoon, Rourke requested an emergency meeting with Internal Affairs. The room was small, windowless, and occupied by 3 investigators who were used to hearing officers defend each other. They greeted him with polite skepticism, but he didn't waste time. He placed his laptop on the table and played the footage. No commentary. No build-up. Just the raw truth. The investigators leaned forward instantly. Angela's trembling voice filled the room. Hart's aggression filled the silence between her words. The moment he shoved her against the hood, one of the investigators muttered under his breath. When the footage ended, the room remained silent for several seconds before the chief investigator finally spoke. This is bad. Rourke exhaled. He had expected denial, pushback, excuses. Instead, there was recognition. The truth was too loud to ignore. They agreed to launch a full internal investigation immediately. But as Rourke gathered his files, the chief investigator stopped him. "You need to understand," he said, "once this comes out, it won't just be about Hart. It'll be about the department, the public, everything we've done, or failed to do, to stop men like him." Rourke nodded. He knew exactly what that meant. This wasn't just the exposing of one man. This was the exposing of a culture. Across town, Angela was trying to hold herself together. She sat at her dining table, holding a warm mug of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Her sister, Naomi, sat beside her, scrolling through her phone, searching for updates, relief, anything. The two of them had grown up believing that faith, hard work, and decency could outrun prejudice. But after what happened, Angela felt something inside her crack. She was afraid to step outside, afraid of being seen, afraid that the world now viewed her not as a nurse, a caregiver, a woman who saved lives, but as a criminal. When her phone rang and she saw an unknown police department number, she hesitated before answering. It was Rourke. He spoke gently, carefully, aware that his voice alone might trigger fear. "Angela, I reviewed the Bodycam footage." Silence filled the line. Angela braced herself. "I want you to know," he continued, "you did absolutely nothing wrong. And we're opening an official investigation into Officer Hart's conduct." Angela's breath caught. She felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief because the truth was finally out. Dread because she knew exposing the truth wouldn't erase the trauma. But for the first time since the arrest, she felt something resembling hope. By the end of the week, the department had no choice but to place Hart on administrative leave pending investigation. Word leaked quickly, things like this always did, and soon the story was spreading across the community. Melissa, the reporter, received confirmation that an internal review had begun. She published a story outlining the inconsistencies in Hart's report, hinting at deeper issues within the department. The article went viral within hours, shared by nurses, activists, former patients of Angela, and even off-duty officers who privately expressed frustration with the culture Hart represented. Meanwhile, the district attorney's office requested access to the footage. Rourke delivered it personally. When the DA viewed it, her reaction was immediate and visceral. "This is assault," she said. "This is a civil rights violation." Public pressure mounted. Protests formed outside the station. People demanded accountability, demanded transparency, demanded justice. And through it all, Angela stayed quiet, partly because she was overwhelmed, partly because she was afraid, but mostly because she wanted the facts to speak for themselves. And they would. Because the footage, once released, would reveal a truth so undeniable, so powerful, so deeply disturbing that even those who once defended Hart would be forced to confront the reality. Angela was telling the truth from the beginning, and the man who tried to destroy her was about to face the consequences. The release of the Bodycam footage shattered the silence that the police department had hoped would hold. Once the video became public, it spread with the force of a tidal wave, shared by journalists, civil rights groups, nurses' unions, and ordinary people who saw themselves or their loved ones in Angela's trembling voice. The footage painted a picture so brutally clear that even those who initially defended Officer Hart were forced to reconsider their stance. The truth was undeniable. Angela had not resisted. She had not threatened. She had not lied. She had simply tried to walk to her car after a long night of helping patients. The fallout was immediate. The police chief held a press conference in front of a restless crowd, his face drawn and his voice strained as he acknowledged deep concern about Hart's conduct. But the public wanted more than concern. They wanted accountability. They wanted justice. They wanted proof that the system valued the life and dignity of a black woman as much as the badge of a man who had abused his power. And for the first time in his career, Hart found himself stripped of authority, stripped of protection, and forced to confront the consequences he believed would never reach him. The internal investigation concluded in record time, but the outcome surprised almost everyone. While Hart was fired, the department declined to pursue criminal charges, citing insufficient intent to harm. The announcement triggered immediate outrage. How could a man be caught on camera assaulting a woman, lying in reports, falsifying evidence, and violating protocol, and still walk away without facing criminal consequences? Protests grew louder, signs filled the streets, and Angela watched it all unfold from her living room, her heart pulled in conflicting directions. She appreciated the support, the solidarity, the people demanding justice in her name. But the trauma still lived inside her, heavy and unresolved. She struggled with nightmares, flinched at sudden sirens, and found herself questioning whether she would ever feel truly safe again. Her attorney suggested filing a civil suit, not just for compensation, but to force the department to confront its failures. Angela agreed, not for revenge, but because she didn't want anyone else to endure what she had. When the lawsuit was filed, the department settled quickly, quietly, and behind closed doors. Angela received a financial settlement that could change her life, but it felt hollow. Money couldn't erase the memory of that night. It couldn't undo what she had experienced. Just when it seemed like the storm was fading, something unexpected happened. Something that would become the final twist in this harrowing story. A former trainee officer named Michael Reeves, who had once worked under Hart, reached out to the district attorney. He claimed he had information about Hart's past conduct, evidence that had never made it into official reports. Reeves had kept a private journal during his training period, documenting moments when Hart had turned off his body cam, intimidated civilians, or used force unnecessarily. He had reported some incidents informally but was discouraged from filing anything official. "He's old school," a supervisor had told him. Let him do his job. Reeves felt powerless then, but after seeing Angela's footage, he couldn't live with the guilt of staying silent. The DA listened carefully and then made a decision that caught the entire department off guard. She reopened the case, now investigating not only Hart but also potential misconduct within the department. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Angela anymore. It was about a pattern, a system, a culture that had enabled Hart's behavior for years. For the first time, Hart faced possible criminal charges, not for a single incident, but for a history of abuse finally brought to light. When Angela heard the news, she felt her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't joy, not exactly, but it was something close to relief. 4 months, she had carried a weight that felt too heavy for one person, a weight built from fear, humiliation, and a shattered sense of trust. Now, she realized she wasn't alone in her fight. Others were stepping forward. Others were speaking out. Others were refusing to let her story be dismissed as an isolated incident. She met with Reeves privately, thanking him for his courage, and the two shared a moment of quiet understanding. They had both been hurt by the same man, in different ways, but now they were connected by truth. Hart, on the other hand, grew increasingly hostile. He denied everything, accused the department of betrayal, blamed Angela, blamed the media, blamed anyone but himself. But as prosecutors began to build a broader case, his defenses started to crumble. Witnesses emerged. Old complaints resurfaced. Patterns became undeniable. And slowly, the facade Hart had built over a decade began to collapse. In the final hearing, the judge reviewed not only Angela's footage but also statements from past victims. Hart sat stone-faced, jaw clenched, eyes darting between the evidence and the courtroom doors as if searching for an escape that no longer existed. In the end, Hart accepted a plea deal, less than many wanted, more than anyone had expected. He avoided prison time but was permanently barred from law enforcement and forced to admit to falsifying reports and using excessive force. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was accountability, something rare in stories like these. Angela stood outside the courthouse afterward. Reporters clustered around her, microphones raised. She spoke softly, but her voice carried strength. "What happened to me should never happen to anyone," she said. "And I hope this opens people's eyes to how important truth is, especially when someone in power tries to hide it." Her words echoed across social media, across news stations, across living rooms where viewers felt the weight of her story. As Angela slowly rebuilt her life, returning to nursing part-time, attending therapy, reconnecting with the sense of peace she once had, her story continued to spark conversations nationwide. And as the world reflected on what the body cam had revealed, one question lingered in the hearts of viewers everywhere. If this truth only surfaced because the camera was accidentally left on, how many stories remain buried in silence? What do you think about the outcome of this case? Do you believe justice was truly served, or is there more the system needs to address? We want to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below. And if this story moved you, opened your eyes, or made you question how power is used and abused, stay with us. Because the next story we're uncovering is even more shocking than this one. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.